I'm very much a person that when there's instructions, I read the diagrams and others only read the text. There's people in between that understand both. Maybe one of those people could turn this into a report so that the others can understand this. So this is a visual representation of the built environment. So you have your city, and I haven't drawn like all the land that's between the city and the next town. So this is a farm representing kind of the rural environment. This is a small town, a bypass, ribbon development, small village, a farm, and this one-off house is a representation of green people living in the country. In the 80s, there was very much a drive to stop urban sprawl, but there was never any plan of where you'd put people or zoning land in your town in a way that it could be developed or that it was possible to develop it. Nowadays, we are gone to very much green policy, especially to do with development and how to build, and it's actually holding up the building of houses. You have, say, so this represents green people living in the countryside. They normally have a polytunnel and they're doing their best to grow their own veg because they've been told that once you're trying to do things green, that's good. It's kind of the a la carte way of being green. We want other people to do radical things while you live the good life in the country. So green people are usually conscientious people with strong family values. So they normally will have 3 kids, which represents 3 houses in the countryside. Please God, this couple in their lifetime will see grandchildren and we'll give them 3 each as well. So that represents another 9 houses in the countryside and 24 cars odd. So green policy is basically low-rise living, but in cities. So, I mean, it's not that radical. I mean, if you're living, we're just going to put you into low-rise apartments with green spaces, of course, and we're going to move you to the city. Farmers are being encouraged to be less productive, to grow more trees, and basically, you know, everything a farmer does is bad. Beef is bad because it leaves off methane. Vegetables in the States are bad because it's monoculture and it's only one type of crop or one plant that's grown. So that's bad. So basically, farming's bad. Grow more trees, so we'll take out a couple of sheds. Instead of all his equipment, tractors and the rest, he now only has one form of transport. And he's growing trees, but not cutting them down because, you know, that'd be productive. This, from a green point of view, is a very positive thing, as farmer then isn't contributing to the ever-expanding economy. And one of these sheds is we're going to say that his production is being transferred to the city to aquaponics, so that your food can be grown in the city and the countryside can be given over to animals only, really. I live in a small town, and there's 14 roads coming out of this town, and the Green Party policy is that we will put 14 buses, we'll have 14 bus routes here. But that's not really green either, because public transport is only green when you have full buses going short distances, whereas buses in the countryside could be out for a half an hour and they're not going to be full, so they can't be green. So we'll take out the parking like they're doing in my town and every other town, and someday everybody will be on bikes, cycling 15 miles on bikes to town. So Eamon Ryan in the country village said that what they're going to do is they're going to have one car between 10 households, or 10 cars between 300 households, and it'll be car share, but there'll be a bus every 10 minutes, I suppose, going multiple different directions as people all want to go to different places. Empty bus, which isn't green, so they'll take out those cars as well. Same thing here. They're trying to force people into towns, so they're going to make it very expensive to have a car, and you'll have to go to the town. Basically, if you can get people out of the countryside, is definitely, when you take into account all the policies, is what they are looking for. I think there's a question that needs to be asked. Are we keeping small villages? My plan for the built environment is, with farmers, around each farm we ask a farmer to plant 10 meters of trees. What that means is it creates an environment for biodiversity and animals. And they plant oaks and hardwoods, but they are not to be cut down, maybe 1 in every 10, but willows as well. And the willows then act as a stored energy that can be used maybe to heat an anaerobic digester, which captures the gas from farming. It's a double whammy, because if it catches gas and there's a heat battery there as well, it stores the energy from windmills, and methane then displaces petrol that we're bringing in from outside, which is a dirty energy, and methane is a clean burn energy. The lack of support for methane plants in the countryside to clean up farming says to me that there is absolutely no support for any type of farming in the countryside. In villages, what I want to do, and it can be replicated, this process basically can be replicated in any urban environment. In a village, you allow for planning permission for 2 rows of houses outside of the village, and the same on the other side. Instead of it being a bypass with 2 rows of cars on it, it has 1 row of cars, or cars going one way. So that car is going that way, and this road is going this way. Sorry, that's 2 rows of houses. What that means is, when you're coming to the village, you can decide that you're going around the village and you go left, and if you want to go into the shops that are in the village, you go straight in. So this is a representation of one-off houses in the country. They're on a half acre for sewerage reasons and effluent reasons, and there are massive, there's a cluster of one-off houses in my town. I think there's about, I don't know, there must be nearly 100 of them, and they're all spread out, and it's complete urban sprawl in the countryside. So in order to regularize that, you allow the gaps in between them to be built on, possibly by family, and instead of the 6 entrances coming out here, they're turned backwards into an estate. And in order for it to be enticing for these people to do that, maybe their families can get the rights to the sites at the back at a cheap rate. The effluent then is piped into, say, a suitable field that the angles are right, where the effluent could be fed into the field to feed the field naturally, and well, that then negates the need for the farmer to use artificial manure. That means then, by allowing houses to be built in here where there's already urban sprawl, you are giving people a place to build in that is now suitable, whether you like it or not, rather than a one-off house in the country. They're in kind of an urban environment, albeit it's not called that. In my town, Killarney, if there was 2 rows of houses put around the town, it would double the number of houses in the town. Basically, in this case, there's a house there already on the outside, so we've put in a second house, and so then there's allowed to be 2 rows beyond it. I saw in Spain, in a village, I noticed that all the houses were different, but they looked uniform because they were all on the same line, as in the front doors were all in a line. So even though you'd be allowing people to buy different size plots and everything else, they would match together because you would have them all on the same line. In England, the inside of towns, like Irish towns, quite a lot of them are dying. And in English towns, the ports died and business moved out of town. And eventually business moved back into town, and the inside of the towns were redeveloped. By doing this, by giving a space for things to happen outside of the town, you're encouraging small businesses by giving them a place to develop, and you're speeding up that process, that kind of natural process that goes on in towns, where the inside of the town, life comes back into it quicker. An awful lot of these urban environments came into existence in the days of horses and cars that drove footfall. In the 80s, there was a big drive to get people to move back into urban environments, to derelict houses, and it never really worked. They're at it now again in the 80s. It's not. I don't think it's going to work this time either. With the outside, like say with your village and with the outside, it means you can create things like villages for older people to move back into. You can create, which I think is the main one, you're keeping the houses close to the urban environment. So you can have a car park outside that it's easy to walk into town. And when you come off, say, your road in the evening, you come into your house here, like you have paths that into town, so you keep the majority of the cars outside of the town, which is something that is actually wanted. Onto the cities. In cities, it's the same process again, but in cities you go slightly higher, and you put in, say, they're talking very much about low-rise apartments with green spaces. So your green space would be in the middle, maybe a bit wider than that. Roads on this side, so all the urban kind of noise is on that side. You could put a train underneath here, so it's cut and cover, so it's not very expensive. And I like buses. I like guided rail. I think guided rail is very efficient. So you've guided rail on the outside. So the guided rail would be going around the outside, say, of Dublin, which then connects with all the spurs that are going into Dublin, kind of connecting all the public transport together. With the trains in Dublin, you get the Cork line coming in, and you get the Belfast line coming in, but they don't connect together. Houston and Connolly don't connect. So you can connect Houston and Connolly, and you bring another line around the outside on that development to the airport. So you come in from Belfast, and you go around, and the train then goes back out. You get off here if you're going south, and the train goes away. but the train that goes around from Cork comes back around, picks you up and takes you to Cork. Basically, you're creating it, and like you can have commuter trains doing the exact same thing. You're creating a commuter line out of the old network of train lines as well. Like, if you brought up those two lines, passenger volume by 20% because you were going to the airport, and it came up another 20%, which is quite possible because for the first time ever you can travel from Cork to Belfast. It would make some dent in paying for the new infrastructure. Planners do planning based on what their employer wants. They're employed by the government. Government is politicians. If you make planning an issue for politicians, then something will happen. But it comes back to you, the individual.